Good morning. My name is Ralph Cole. I was born on April 17th, 1924 in Long Beach, California. I grew up after 3 years in California. We moved to Geneva, Switzerland, where I lived until the age 6½. And then my father's work was such that it was very interesting. We sat in the living room. He had a globe in front of him, and he asked us to look at the globe, which I did with my sister and mother. Of course, I knew I was in Geneva, and there was nothing special about that. And then he turned the globe halfway around the world, and out in the big blue were these islands. And he said, "We're going to Hawaii." And there I had the privilege of living until about 4 months before Pearl Harbor. We knew, of course, the war was coming. When we would go surfing, our last wave before we would go in, we wouldn't say goodbye or aloha. We would say, "See you at the front." Everyone out there knew the war was coming. I will remember in June of '41 going out to the YMCA camp and looking down at Pearl Harbor. The ships were all lined up beautifully. My mother said, "This is terrible. They will be an obvious place the Japanese will attack." It's always amazed me that the American people were not aware of how serious the world situation was at that time. And that's true today with what's going on. But at least I was privileged to come back to the mainland. I attended Occidental College for a year and 3/4, enlisted in the Army Reserve, and was called in into the Army. And during the war, I served in the 89th Infantry Division. It was part of Patton's Third Army, and we arrived in France in January of 1945. And you might find this of interest. Our first casualties when we landed at Le Havre were not from the Germans. They were from the French, the Vichy French. It was an education. And you asked a little bit about some of my military experiences. We fought across the Moselle, fought across the Rhine, took the first concentration camp at a place called Ohrdruf, and then fought on east until finally the war ended.
What year would have been when
this was 1945. You asked a little bit about some of the experiences. I would say that one of the first ones was when we were in France. There was a field, and a friend and I went out. We were not firing at that time, and went out to look at the view. And interestingly enough, there was a young lady out there. I got talking to her, and I asked her name in French, "Qu'est-ce que vous nom, s'il vous plaît?" And she said no. Well, anyway, finally, I said, she said, "Monique Paré," and I said, not knowing how to say it in French, I said, "Spell it, s'il vous plaît." And she said, "Monique-Paray." It turned out Monique was the daughter of the conductor of the Paris Symphony. And her father was conducting the Paris Symphony, and Hitler came in there. And he walked off the stage. He would not conduct for Hitler. There was a big discussion about executing him on the spot. Finally, the Germans decided it wouldn't look too good to say they executed the director symphony conductor, so they ordered him never to conduct for the rest of his life, which he did come to the United States after the war and conducted here. But then we went on into the fighting. You might find this of a little interest. If you ever go to a Hollywood movie and you see people with their insignia on, the officers with their insignia on the sleeves, the enlisted with the insignia on, and on the sleeves, and the officers up here on the neck, those people were not in battle. The night before we went into heavy battle, everyone had to take every bit of insignia off, so we all looked identical, except, and I think our government made a little mistake, the medics had to continue to have the Red Cross on their helmets. So obviously the Germans used the medics as the first target, but otherwise they could not differentiate rank of anyone. I have been asked about what went on the Moselle. I have vivid memories of that. I was a shell hole reporter. Now, a shell hole reporter's job is to be up at the front when a shell comes in, to jump out of his foxhole and jump into the hole where the shell is landed, and then to take measurements. It was actually the highest casualty operation of any assignment in the war. They lost more shell hole reporters. Fortunately, I survived, but I don't know why. And on the Moselle, you might find this a little interest. The shell came in, and thank goodness they didn't fire another shell right after that. The other man and I took the measurements in the shell hole, figured out what weapon it was, and then one man stood in the hole and the other stood out about 20 feet with an aiming circle. It's a surveying device, and got the direction from which the shell came. And in those days we did not have radio usage for this. We had a little telephone with a small wire. And fortunately, our line was not cut. It got back to the fire control, and we brought counter battery, and when we were able, therefore, to cross the Rhine and the Moselle, and when we did, I saw the results of our work. We must have killed about 80 or so people, but we made it across the river. I would say my most vivid memory of many instances was the death camp of Ohrdruf, O-H-R-D-R-U-F. It was the first concentration camp to fall. The American people were not aware that there were things as horrible as it was. And when we took the camp, we couldn't believe it. A vivid memory I have is about 30 or so bodies. The last people, prisoners at the camp, had been machine gunned, including an American pilot who had been captured. Bodies were stacked in warehouses, about 12 bodies and 10 like that up into a triangle, and lye, I believe it is, was put on to try to make the bodies disintegrate. I well remember one body on a spit, like you would take a pig and roast it, where the body of the man had been tied by his feet and by his arms, and he'd been roasted and was lying there. Interestingly enough, General Eisenhower at the time felt it was such a shock that he tried to get a number of his generals to see the thing and as many troops as he could. And any questions that we who took the camp had as to why we were fighting, there were no questions anymore. We could not have that type of situation occur, and certainly not occur in our country. I do remember one incident. While I was there, I looked off to my left, and there was another man, as probably filthy dirty as I was, and we looked at each other and couldn't believe it. And we were fraternity brothers and hadn't seen each other since we went in the Army, and he was in the 4th Armored Division. And we just were together briefly, and then over us came a German plane, started strafing, fortunately missed us. But for the rest of my life, I can't understand how people can be so bestial, so unkind. It's just unbelievable. We fought on east in very heavy fighting in certain spots. I have a memory you might find of a little interest. In one session, I had to dig 8 foxholes in 3 days. And for those of you who are not familiar with what a foxhole is, it's a hole in the ground and you dig it as fast as you can and get in below, hopefully below the level of the ground for safety. And we were in one location on a sort of a hillside, at the end of a hillside there, and there's a valley down this way and a valley up the other side, and we had dug in here. I'm not necessarily a religious person, but I don't understand it. All I know is that something kept telling me, get out of that foxhole and go across and dig in again. But the normal procedures, you don't do that. But I violated what you don't do. And I said to about 6 or 8 of my men, I said, we're going to get out and run across and dig in again.
Well, you just
What they said to me at that time was not very complimentary. But that night, all hell broke loose. And the next morning, when things calmed down, we went back there, and where we had been totally obliterated. So they thanked me. We fought on the east, and you might find this somewhat of a little interest. There are other anecdotes, but I don't want to bore you. But one that we were north of Czechoslovakia. Things had calmed down a little bit. I mean, sure, there was firing back and forth, but it wasn't as bad as it had been. And the word came, prepare for attack at 0600, 6 in the morning. That was on May 7th of 45. And we were up all night getting our weapons ready. And at 0200 of the 8th, the word came, continue preparation for attack, but may stand down. We'd never had that at all. At 0400, the same order came. We couldn't understand what was going on. And at 5 minutes of 6, 5 minutes before the attack, the word came, cancel attack, war is over. It was unbelievable. Then through our lines came tanks and half-tracks, Germans sitting in the trucks with holding their weapons, glaring at us. We had our rifles all ready to fire, and we glared at them, but they went through into the rear, and not one shot was fired. A group of us decided then to see what we were to have attacked. So we went down another valley and across and looked up there, and as long as I live, I'll remember the huge concrete abutment and the guns pointed down at us. If the war had been on 9 May, it ended then instead of 8 May, I would not be talking to you today. When we pulled back and went back into France, our next job was to invade Japan. We were there getting our weapons ready, and no one was too excited to have to go through another period of heavy warfare. And I well remember one morning a man came through this camp and said, "I understand we've dropped a bomb." Well, so what? We had been bombed plenty. So that didn't mean much to anybody. Then a little later a man came through and said, "The word's come over that it was a big bomb." Well, we then got a little more interested in, well, the big bomb, that's a little encouraging. And then came the word, they call it an atom bomb, and we've obliterated a Japanese city. I can still hear the men yelling in happiness at that, because they felt then that we had a chance of not having to invade Japan. I have many memories of the war, and a war is not a good thing, but I do feel strongly that we should be a strong country and keep our defenses. And I feel strongly, I was talking to a friend of mine this morning, we should do as they do in Switzerland and a few other countries, where every young person is called upon for at least 2 years of service to his or her country, not necessarily all militarily, but do something for the country. And anything that you who are watching this can do to help toward the defense and the improvement of our nation, you would be doing excellently. Thank you very much. After the war, I returned to the States and decided to go to Stanford. And I went to Stanford and then the Stanford Graduate School of Business. And then I worked for about 2 years as an economist with the Department of Labor, Bureau of Labor Statistics. And then decided that I wanted to get into more corporate life. And I was with Pacific Telephone, which is a part of AT&T, for 33 years. A very good company. And one of my last assignments with another man, we created Pactel Properties, which is the real estate subsidiary for the company, so that real estate would be managed by the company instead of each manager in each city who trying to manage his own real estate. When I retired from that, I was bored to death and then decided to continue with real estate.
What year would that have been about?
That would have been, I believe it was about 1983.
Okay.
And so I've done commercial real estate ever since, until retiring fully. And it was quite an adventure to slow down after being rather busy a lifetime. But it's been a good life. I have no complaints. My main point is, as I mentioned earlier in our discussion together, that I feel every young person should serve our country in some capacity, at least for 2 years. And it does not have to be in the military, but I'm talking of men and women serving our country. And I think, and I know they would be happy, and we'd have a better country.
No
And
question.
God bless to each of you, and I hope you will do the same. Thank you very much.
You include women in that?
Yes. Yes.
Women also should serve?
Yes,
Well, of course.
yes, like in Switzerland.
And Israel.
And Israel, yes. They don't all have to be fighters, but they can be helping the country and helping poor
Yes,
people,
yes.
helping the sick, helping kids, doing something, not just for themselves, selfishly.
That would certainly make the United States a better country.
It would.
And it would make these individuals realize and make them a better person
You're right.
for sure.
Well, I think everybody, men and women, should have the opportunity to fire a weapon. I think they should all understand that.
And if some have objections
You're
to
right.
the weapons, they
Go
could,
along with that.
Yeah.
if they have objections to the weapons, religious-wise or otherwise, at least they can serve the country and serve other people.
Yep. What could be better?
Yes.
Not that it's perfect. Hey, thank you very much, Ralph.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. I'm recording all that right now.
Joe.
Ralph, could you tell me about some of these items that you have here on the couch?
Yes, these are some of the souvenirs that I brought back. A number of them I do not have anymore, but they might be of a little interest to you. This is an SS helmet, German SS. That was their most violent group. Interestingly enough, on the German helmets, they had something that we didn't have in our uniforms. And that was, this fits on the back so that if it's on the soldier, the snow does not go in the back of his shirt. A very good idea. This was a Russian pistol that I was able to secure, and the Russians had good equipment. I would say the Germans had better equipment in many respects than we did. I did have a very excellent Luger that I carried in combat at all times, but when it was back here, someone stole it from me. So I'm sorry I don't have it for you to look at. This is the the Nazi insignia that they wore on their arms. And this is a Nazi dagger. Here are a couple of bayonets that went on their rifles. I have a German rifle also here if you ever wanted to see it. And every good soldier always carried his canteen, and because you learned in the military that you took a drink of water or so forth when you had the time, because you might be so busy that you didn't have the time to do it again. This is some German money that, of course, is worth nothing now, I suppose, but at the time of Hitler's time, it was quite a good deal of money. I have a camera here also, but I will tell you a little bit about cameras. You might find this of a little interest. When we would take a town, the instructions were that all cameras had to be laid on the main street of the town so that they would not take pictures. And I do remember this particular camera where it was a Nazi leader's house, and we came up there, and I had said to the person who answered, "Kamera," and they said, "Nix camera," meaning they didn't have one. So I pulled back the bolt, and they said, "Yeah, yeah, yeah," and they gave me the camera. It may sound bad today, but in those days, cameras were very important because they would take pictures of our troops, of our installations, and get them back, and then we lost a lot of lives until we started obtaining the cameras. I was asked to show this to you very briefly. 3 years ago, one of my sons asked to show some medals to, he wanted them, and I asked him why, and he said he wanted to show them to his children. And so I had to work very hard to find these. They were in boxes and in drawers, and I don't know if I found all of them or not yet. But anyway, on Christmas 3 years ago, he gave me this framed situation, and I was asked to tell you a little about them. This is the Army Reserve Medal. This is the Reserve Achievement Medal. This is the medal they gave to everyone who fought in the war, the World War II Victory Medal. This is the American campaign, if we were in the American campaign, and this is in the European campaign. An Army Good Conduct, and then this is the Army Commendation Medal, the Meritorious Service Medal, and the Legion of Merit. The Legion of Merit, I'm very pleased to have. They don't issue many of those. And you might find this one of interest. This was presented after the war. They had a big remembrance ceremony here in Marin County in honor of the Holocaust and in honor of Anne Frank, who was killed, and of the 6 million Jewish people who were killed by the Nazis. And they asked to have 3 liberators and 3 liberatees attend. I didn't know what we were going to do, but we got there, and each of us had to walk out on the stage with a candle burning, representing, each one of us represented 1 million who had been killed unmercifully by the Germans. And it was given this in memory, and it means a great deal to me, because having seen Ohrdruf and seeing what, I hate to say it, but what monsters some of those people were, I have many memories, and I'm thankful that our country won the war. Incidentally, a lot of times they don't teach it in school, but our country was divided down the Mississippi River by the Japanese and the Germans. And the Japanese were to get from the Mississippi River to San Francisco. The Germans were to get from the Mississippi River to New York. And unfortunately, lots of people are not aware of that. And we can be thankful, so thankful, that did not take place. In combat, we always had to wear dog tags to identify ourselves. And in addition, this is a bracelet that my wife, who was at that time my fiance, gave me. Many of us wore those not because for beauty, but in case we were killed and part of us were missing, they could identify. And I thought that was very gracious of her. These are a few other medals that I've gotten. And this, my son was kind enough to point out, this is when I was an enlisted man in heavy fighting, and this indicates a year overseas in combat. And then these are the various ranks from second lieutenant, first lieutenant, captain, major, lieutenant colonel, and colonel. And I think I've covered just about everything. I may not have mentioned this, but many soldiers carried with them, and I carried this in combat. This is the Bible, the New Testament, and it was very helpful.
Can you hold, hold it up?
It was very helpful and reassuring.
Could you hold it again? But just hold it here, but just don't move. Okay, I got it.
I think
That's good.
I think this covers what you want.
Yeah, I think it's excellent. Unless you have anything else to say.
No, I think that's enough.
Okay, guess what? Everything, all total, you've talked 33 minutes.
Okay. That'll put him to sleep.
Mean on this part?
No, I got total.